the Garnet Trust Hour on your home of the Gamecocks. 107.5 The Game.
And welcome in to the Extra Point here on 107.5 The Game. A little bit of a scheduling change today as the Garnet Trust Hour is going to be Wednesday and Thursday this week, as Wes and Chris had to take part in a meeting today for, I believe it was on 3. In fact, I think Colin's actually in the other side of the studio doing that right now. But we did move the Garnet Trust Hour to Wednesday and Thursday this week. So this is the Extra Point for today. And then, of course, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs coming up at 11 o'clock as we do each and every day. I want to start off today's episode talking a little bit about this list that came out yesterday. And you know, we talk about the lead up to the season kind of being the season of list. And there's a reason we call it that, because I feel like every couple of days we have a new list that does end up coming up that we can talk about. And this one coming out from ESPN yesterday as they released their preseason All-American team, the ESPN preseason All-American team. And no surprise, you got a lot of usual suspects on here. You have Caleb Williams as the All-American for the quarterback position. No surprise. He obviously won the Heisman Trophy last year. Expected to be just as good, if not better, this season, potentially the number 1 overall pick in next year's NFL draft. He's going to be playing alongside former South Carolina running back and Marshawn Lloyd, which seems to have emerged as the number 1 running back for the Southern Cal Trojans for 2023. He did lose his top receiver in Jordan Addison to the NFL draft this past season, but USC did do a good job in the transfer portal, bringing in Dorian Singer from Arizona, who had over 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns last year, and a very sought-after wide receiver coming in as a true freshman in Zachariah Branch, who is expected to do a lot of stuff. And, for that Southern Cal team, as bad as they were on defense last year, which was highlighted by their atrocious performance against Tulane in that Cotton Bowl, they did go out and add a lot of pieces in the transfer portal, namely a guy like Barry Alexander coming up from Georgia. You have Traquan Fagans from Alabama at the defensive back position. They really went out there and attacked the transfer portal with their defense. Will Alex Grinch be able to do anything with that defense is the biggest question, but they at least went out and had some big ads to see if they can bolster up what, again, was a really bad defense for Southern Cal a season ago. So no surprise that, Caleb Williams is top of this list at the quarterback spot. You got Blake Corum as well at running back, somebody that was potentially on pace to be in New York himself for the Heisman Trophy ceremony, as he went for over 1,400 yards, just shy of 1,500 yards actually, and 18 touchdowns before suffering that injury just before the season ended. And you do wonder what difference he possibly could have made in that semifinal game against TCU had he been at full health. But if you're wondering if any Gamecocks made the list, you are in luck. One did, in fact, make the list. And if you're not surprisingly, it's going to be somebody from special teams. Kai Kroger, Gamecocks punter, was named to ESPN's preseason All-American list. The write-up they gave for him. Entering his 4th season as South Carolina's punter, Kroger averaged 44.2 yards per punt during his career, emerging a year ago as an MVP candidate for the Gamecocks and one of the most flexible special teams players in the country, averaging 46.1 yards per punt and 29 punts down inside the 20-yard line, including 3 inside the 5 with the victory over Clemson last year. Kroger is more than just a punter. He has thrown 3 career touchdowns as a trick play player and also holds on place kicks. And obviously, we know how great of a punter and just all-around special teams player Kai Kroger is, so it's nice to see that ESPN giving him a nod there, and he's going to be of vital importance to this team in 2023. No surprise there. Of course, special teams is a big part of what Coach Beamer's identity is as head coach, and obviously Coach Limbo being easily the best special teams coordinator in the entire country. And while punter is such a funny position, because he's obviously the one guy that you never want to see take the field because you hope your offense does enough to score on every single drive. That's obviously not feasible in the game of football. You are inevitably going to have to punt, but when you have somebody that comes out there, you want them to be as efficient as possible and give your defense the best possible chance to hold the offense or hold the other team's offense, get the ball back as quickly as possible. When you have a guy like Kai Kroger, again, booming off 46.1 yards per punt last season and downing all those ones inside the 20, that definitely sets your defense up to be successful. And we hope he can continue that this season. And I imagine that there's going to be probably more trick plays coming as well. And the question is, can Kai Kroger continue to remain perfect as far as his pass completion goes? And we'll see how many more times they want to roll that kind of thing out. And that's one thing when it comes to being known as a trick play type of special teams guy. The other team's going to be looking for it more and more, to where you do end up having to get a little bit more creative with how you do it, with who you're throwing to. I know you hit Hunter Rogers, who was the long snapper in the bowl game against Notre Dame, which is something a little bit more unexpected. But again, you just got to kind of look at different ways to do it, because teams are certainly going to be keying in on it a lot more. And when you talk about a team like South Carolina, that, and Colin and I talked about this yesterday, we feel like the ceiling for this team is probably somewhere around 9-3, but the floor could certainly be that 7-5 to 6-6. The difference in some of those games, talk about going on the road to Missouri, you talk about going on the road to Texas A&M in back-to-back weeks, games that we expect to be very, very competitive matchups, having either the non-offensive touchdown from special teams or just being able to flip the field position with good punts from a guy like Kai Kroger could end up being pivotal in deciding that game, that hopefully goes the way for the Gamecocks, because those are two tough matchups, and I just kind of highlight those because I think those are two of the more pivotal ones of the entire season that could really swing either way. I feel like you know what you're going to get when you go into Athens, and we can be very optimistic about going to Knoxville, but that's going to be a very, very tough environment, and hopefully South Carolina can replicate what they did against the Volunteers last year, but it's definitely going to be a challenge, especially with the Volunteers going to be out for blood after what happened in Williams-Brice this past season. So you look at some of those other matchups that Colin and I talked about yesterday that could really flip either way, and something as simple as getting a special teams touchdown, as again pinning somebody or pinning the other team within the 20-yard line, 10-yard line, whatever it may be, can go a long way in deciding who does ultimately win those games. So well-deserved honor for Kai Kroger being named to this preseason All-American list, and I certainly expect him to have another excellent season. Other guys that ended up making this list, you had, or from the special team standpoint, Josh Carty from Stanford, who was 18 for 18 on field goal attempts last year with a long of 61. And then LaDatra Griffin as a returner for Mississippi State. And obviously one of the best returners in the country this past season. No surprise, you got a lot of Georgia players that ended up making this list because, of course, they won the national championship last year. We talked about earlier, they're number one overall in the AP poll heading into the season and are expected to win a lot of games once again. One, though, that I feel like you could make an argument that a South Carolina player could have taken this spot is in reference to Malachi Starks, who is Georgia's safety and played a vital role on that defense leading to the national championship last year. When you look at Malachi Starks' stats, though, quite comparable to DQ Smith's. So Malachi Starks last season had 69 tackles, 45 solo tackles with 2 interceptions and 7 pass deflections. DQ Smith, on the other hand, had 59 tackles, 40 solo, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble, 2 interceptions, 1 pass deflection, and a pick 6 as well, which came in that bowl game against Notre Dame. So not saying that Malachi Starks is not deserving of getting that nod as the preseason All-American at the safety spot. You just, if I had to pick a second option for that, I think DQ Smith very well could have made the argument to be the person in that position. Again, this is just a list for the preseason. Again, nothing more than a talking point at this point in time, but certainly good to at least have one Gamecock on that list, and Kai Kroger. And again, I think DQ Smith was very close to making this list himself. And we'll obviously see what the thoughts and opinions of these players and how they change over the course of the season. And what really matters is who's on the All-American list once the season comes to an end. We'll see how many Gamecocks ending up on that list when the season does finally come to a close. Coming up, no surprise here, more talk of conference realignment because we got news that, well, we didn't get news yesterday, which is also kind of news in reference to what's going on with Florida State. I'll talk about that a little bit more coming up next. Real quick, though, I want to remind you about the 107.5 The Game football kickoff golf tournament, which is coming up Friday, August 25th. That's just over a week and a half away out at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia. If you want to take part in it, it's $100 per person and $400 per group. Going to be raffling off tickets to the home opener versus Furman. Also, a pair of Gamecock season tickets as well. Also, passes to Carewind, among other prizes. Going to have lunch provided by Firehouse Subs. It all gets kicked off with a 9:30 in the morning shotgun start. If you want to take part in this, give Charwood a call at 803-755-2000. Again, 803-755-2000. If you want to take part in the 107.5 The Game football kickoff golf tournament. Latest with conference realignment. What isn't Florida State going to be doing today? That's coming up next. You're listening to The Extra Point. I'm Tyler Head, 107.5 The Game.
Point with Tyler Head and Gamecock Central on your home of the Gamecocks. 107.5 The Game.
I don't think they feel like the Big Ten. This sounds snooty, but they view themselves as sort of an academic elite conference. Washington, USC, UCLA are considered really elite universities. So is Northwestern, Michigan, Penn State. Wisconsin's considered a public Ivy. I'm not knocking Florida State, Clemson. Those feel like football powers. One of the things I appreciate about the SEC is they don't lose any sleep. They love their football. They're not, they're not going to pretend they're this or that. Not that universities don't matter, but they're all in on football. It drives the cultural bus and the revenue bus. I'm okay with that. I do think the Big Ten, they view themselves a certain way. And whether it's snooty or not, you may disagree, but I kind of feel they think Washington and USC and UCLA fit their academic profile.
Welcome back into the Extra Point here on 107.5 The Game. Tyler Head along with you on this Tuesday morning. Want to let you know coming up at 10:30, going to be talking with Shelby Swanson, who is the sports editor at the Daily Tar Heel. Going to break down a little bit of this week one matchup coming up with North Carolina just 18 days from now with her. So I'm very excited to get her insight from a North Carolina perspective. What you just heard was Colin Cowherd. He was talking with Greg McElroy on the Always College Football podcast just the other day about everything going on with Florida State, and he included Clemson in there as well, and what their possible moves could be should they choose to lose or should they decide to leave the ACC. Well, we learned yesterday, this coming from Brett McMurphy of the Action Network, Florida State has not scheduled a Board of Regents meeting for Tuesday. Of course, the deadline to notify the ACC team, the ACC, of departure is coming up today. Now, I don't know if that's a hard 5 o'clock deadline or if they have up until 11:59 p.m. like we all did in college when we had those assignments we had to turn in at the very last minute. But regardless, they have to inform the ACC at some point today if they plan on leaving for the 2024-2025 season. Now, the stuff these past couple weeks with the Board of Trustees, saying we definitely want out and we're not happy with the ACC, and then this rumor coming out last week that they were seeking private investments to raise the funds to get out of the ACC, and now you get to this point, and I think it just proves that Florida State has grossly overvalued what their brand is really worth, and assuming that somebody's going to be willing to pony up the money that it would take for them to leave the ACC. And I don't know if you've seen these numbers. The exit fee itself is over $200 million. Plus, you add in the legal fees. Again, that's just the fee to depart from the ACC, to say, we, Florida State, no longer want to be a member of the Atlantic Coast Conference. It's going to cost us this much money, which is a lot, obviously. There's also the situation of legal fees in reference to getting out of the grant of rights, which, as we know, is pretty darn ironclad. So if you wanted anything, if you wanted to have any control over your media rights at all, or if you wanted your new conference, should Florida State be able to leave, to have any control over your media rights, you'd have to get out of this grant of rights first. And the estimated cost and legal fees alone on that would be in the area of like $500 million. So you're asking somebody to give you the private investment of like $600-700 million just to leave the ACC. And as of right now, I don't see any landing spot for Florida State. Because, again, we just, they assume at least that the SEC and the Big Ten are just going to be ready to scoop them up. Say, whoa, we want that brand. SEC's show no interest in that. Greg Sankey the other week on Paul Feinbaum's show, in kind of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, I think at Florida State, said we don't see any options out there that we're really exploring, which means, hey, we're not looking at Tallahassee. The Big Ten's at 18 schools right now. They're good. They got to figure out how to make that work first before they even think of expanding to 19 or 20. And I feel like 18 might be the cap as far as conference limits go for a while. So Big Ten's got their own thing to figure out. Could you go to the Big 12? Sure, but you're not improving as far as what you're going to be making per year. So you just be doing that to spite the ACC. What this does do, though, again, confirms that Florida State's going to be around the ACC for a lot longer. I think this kind of puts, at least at this point in time, a nail in the Stanford and Cal discussions. Because, of course, if Florida State were to have departed the ACC or announced they're going to depart the ACC, that means that all future decisions, as far as voting members would go, would not include Florida State because they would no longer be a part of the conference. So that moves that one no vote, as we learned the other day, that Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina State all said no to adding the California schools. Well, that would remove one of the votes. Probably be a pretty easy way to bring those schools in, and you'd be supplementing losing Florida State with bringing at least one of those schools, probably both of them. So that's probably not going to happen. So this all ties back to what's the next thing that's going to happen with the Pac, whatever we're going to call it, 4, 12, 8, 10, who knows, the Pac, whatever. Now you just kind of got 4 schools that are sitting out there not knowing what to do. And again, as you know, with the deadline for Florida State informing the ACC of what they want to do as far as 2024 goes, the Pac, whatever conference, has to be figuring out right now what they're going to do in reference to 2024 as well. Now, there was some speculation that the Mountain West was kind of waiting to see what the fallout of the ACC deal was going to be before maybe going forward with some kind of merger with the Pac conference. And again, once we get to midnight tonight and you see that Florida State's not leaving the ACC, which in turn means that vote's not going to change of allowing or not allowing the California schools in, I think that opens up the opportunity for the Mountain West and the Pac to maybe put a deal together, but we'll see. The clock is certainly ticking. And again, you say, it's a year from now, they got time to figure it out. They really don't. Because when you talk about figuring out scheduling, obviously figuring out the media rights deal, which the Pac still hasn't gotten nailed.
You want to buy a car or a house, travel, retire? But it's getting harder to figure out what's the best way to spend and invest. Afford Anything is a podcast that teaches you how to be smart with your money.
Take the amount of money that you would make on that car payment, make that payment to yourself. That way, if you have to make a major repair, it can come out of that. And when you do go to buy your next car, who knows, maybe all 5 years worth of car payments have accumulated over that time. Afford Anything, wherever you listen.
Down. Those are things that you need to be doing right now to have them in place for 2024. And again, as we creep closer and closer to the start of the 2023 season and the Pac has not figured out what they're going to do with their 4 remaining schools and how they're going to make all that work, you just wonder what a mess it's going to be when 2024 does end up coming around. Like I said, coming up next, going to be talking to Shelby Swanson from the Daily Tar Heel as we break down this week one matchup, which we are just over 2.5 weeks away from. We'll get Shelby's insight into the North Carolina program and what we can expect from that week one matchup. That's next. You're listening to The Extra Point. I am Tyler Head on 107.5 The Game.
What you're talking about. Sponsored by Love Chevrolet. 107.5 The Game.
And welcome back into The Extra Point here on 107.5 The Game. Tyler Head along with you on this Tuesday morning. So very excited for college football to finally get here as we get closer and closer to week number 1 and seeing the Gamecocks take on the North Carolina Tar Heels. Going to head out to Love Chevrolet phone lines now and welcome in the sports editor of the Daily Tar Heel up there in Chapel Hill, Shelby Swanson, joining me now. First of all, Shelby, thanks so much for taking a few minutes of your time this morning. And can you believe we are only 18 days away from this matchup finally happening?
No, I mean, it's been a long summer here. I feel like everybody, including myself, has just had this game circled on their calendar. And I know as soon as I found out College Game Day was coming as well, that just amps everything up even more. And just kind of with this, border rivalry, if you want to call it that, I think a lot of eyes are on this game. A lot of UNC fans here on campus are super excited for this matchup.
You mentioned the border rivalry, and these are two teams that have managed to play each other quite a few times over the past few years, and obviously the last time being funny enough at Bank of America Stadium in the Duke's Mayo Bowl a couple of seasons ago with South Carolina coming out on top and Shane Beamer getting that lovely Mayo bath. But this goes a whole lot deeper when you talk about from a recruiting standpoint being border states and South Carolina goes into North Carolina to pull a lot of recruits and vice versa with Tar Heels coming down into South Carolina. So this game has a lot more stakes than just the right for one team to be called the real Carolina.
100%, yeah. I mean, it's really become one of those games that, if I'm being honest, me and my friends here at UNC look forward to this matchup more than a UNC Duke game, at least in terms of football. So should be super exciting.
So last season through 10 games, it's kind of funny. These two teams are a little bit polar opposite. Through 10 games, Carolina fans weren't feeling great about what they had. And, we're kind of limping into that Tennessee matchup after getting beaten pretty badly by Florida down in Gainesville. On the other side of things, North Carolina was sitting very pretty through 10 games at 9-1, but then the last 4 games of the season completely went south, starting off with the loss at Georgia Tech, culminating with the Holiday Bowl loss against Oregon. What really went wrong in those last 4 games for the Tar Heels last year?
Right. So as you just said, towards the end of that 2022 season, North Carolina Tar Heels experienced a real downturn in performance and suffered a series of losses, 4 straight, that really just dampened the season, kind of put a sour taste in their mouths. And really several factors contributed to this decline, one being offensive struggles. The UNC offense had been basically as dynamic and high-scoring as you really can be earlier in the season, and they began to sputter. People were able to read Drake May a little bit more late into the season, and he'd shown great consistency. But then all of a sudden, ACC championship game, he's throwing a pick 6. Fans are kind of putting their hands on their heads. It's like, what is happening? And the offense's efficiency and effectiveness decreased. There was a lack of consistent scoring. And really, with the way that UNC's defense was playing last season, you needed that consistent scoring. But not to shy away from the defense, they faced difficulties as well, especially in containing opponents' big plays, surrendering a lot of those kind of explosives that Matt Brown talks about so much. The ACC championship game, again, against Clemson, for example, 7 plays of 16 or more yards, 4 of 26 or more yards were given up. And that just put additional pressure on the team as they struggled to keep opponents from gaining significant yards and scoring. And, we can also get into some of the turnovers UNC had, red zone inefficiency. There was a whole lot going on. But really, I think it started from those explosive plays that they were giving up, and also just offensive struggles kind of cropping up out of nowhere at the end of the season.
Again, we're talking to Shelby Swanson, the sports editor at the Daily Tar Heel up in Chapel Hill, talking about that defense. Statistically one of the worst in the entire country last season. I played a clip a little bit earlier of Gene Chizik last week talking to the media about feeling a sense of urgency with this defense this year. Lost a handful of guys to the transfer portal, did bring in a couple as well. Any names on this transfer portal list that particularly stick out to you that people should be excited about?
I'm trying to think. Really on the defensive side of the ball, I'm looking at Elijah Huzzy. He's somebody who, I saw him in fall camp last week with an interception against Drake May. All the reporters kind of turning to each other like, whoa, what's going on? Now, again, I don't want anyone coming for me. It was really kind of a read on the route thing. So not a true Drake May interception. Don't want to put it out there because, again, those things are rare. But he's somebody that has come in and really, really been impressive. Chiswick's been talking about him a lot. And he's somebody that I'm super excited to see in this, again, College Day matchup because he's talking about just before, coming to UNC, all his games were being broadcast on ESPN Plus kind of thing he was joking about with us. So he's somebody who I think is really excited to see just how his, skills match up at this higher level. He's excited to play on that big stage come September 2nd.
Yeah, I know it may not be attractive seeing somebody come in from an East Tennessee State. When you look at what he was able to do in 4 years at that school, 179 tackles, 12 picks, and 30 broken up passes. That's somebody that's played a lot of football, and you do 100%. Have a lot of value in that experience coming in.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. But I was going to take the opportunity. I said, not as many transfers I was looking at on the defensive side of the ball, but thought we could take a moment to just talk about this entire Tez Walker situation.
Yes.
Yeah. No, go ahead. You got it.
I was going to say, we all kind of know what the ruling was last week that came down from the NCAA, and we did hear Mack Brown speak about that. They are appealing this decision. As we know, nothing happens fast with the NCAA, though, and, talking about something changing over the course of the next 18 days is very much wishful thinking. Well, what's the latest that you know about what's going on with this?
Right. As of right now, no word from UNC camp, but we are going to be speaking to Mack Brown today in fall camp. So, stay tuned to that, see if there's anything that comes out relating to that. But right now they are just in that process of appealing the waiver. And in terms of how they're treating Walker in fall camp, they are really just full steam ahead. Talking to Chip Lindsey, he said, he's out there getting reps. When I've been at the open practices, he's suited up. They're really treating it as if he is going to be playing, come that week one. Certainly just hope so for the kid. I mean, Charlotte native really wants to be able to play in front of his grandmother that's been suffering some ailments. So as of now, no official word, but UNC is being very proactive in that waiver appeal process, and they certainly seem very confident that all will be resolved come this game.
So if Tez Walker is not able to go in week number one, are you looking more towards the J.J. Jones being wide receiver number one, or the other transfer wide receiver and Nate McCullough coming over from Georgia Tech?
Oof. For me, I'm leaning more McCollum, but again, it's really been hard to tell because, again, asking any questions in media availability, they're pretty much like they're really not giving us anything in terms of that. I mean, they are, again, very, very confident that he's going to play come week one. So at least from my perspective, I can't really give any intel on, what the coaches are thinking. If it were me, I'd be looking more of McCollum, but really they are pretty confident that they're going to be incorporating, Tez Walker as their number one target. Now, obviously, we'll see how this plays out. If he's not available, there's going to have to be some last-minute shuffling, so that will be potentially interesting to report on. But, again, at this point, they're very confident he's going to be playing.
Well, and that's the tricky part about it is you obviously want Tez Walker to practice as if he's going to play in case something does change at the last minute, but at the same time, you don't want to take away significant reps from other guys in case that doesn't happen.
Exactly. No.
Drake May, a lot of hype coming into this season, obviously thought to be one of the top picks for the Heisman, projected to be one of the top picks overall in the NFL draft. Obviously a great season last year. How do you feel like he's handled this coming into the season, and how do you think he'll handle it as the season goes along?
Yeah, I mean, we, always ask this question to, Lindsey, Mac Brown. One of Mac's, favorite quotes out there is, Drake is Drake. I mean, I don't think they're very concerned about the pressure surrounding him, because it's not like receiving attention for the Heisman Trophy is some new thing. I mean, he had all this hype surrounding him last season, and now I think there's even more of a chip on his shoulder. He's realized that, his success in especially the Heisman Trophy race, it really depends on the success of the team as a whole. Mac Brown, I think, was kind of joking at ACC kickoff that had the season, not gone through that downward spiral at the end, May would have been at that award show for the Heisman Trophy. So he knows that, there's obviously a lot of pressure on him, but it's not just him. It's, can he help the team, win and continue to have that late season success? And he seems pretty confident in that. He was talking at, again, ACC kickoff, saying that he thinks that this wide receiver core is the best it's been in his years here. I really think that he's used to playing under the bright lights. I don't really have any worries about him or, freaking out, getting nervous on the field. I don't think the coaching staff does either. And in terms of all that hype, I think really it's fueling him this season to help the team win.
And with the offense going to be a new guy calling the shots, Chip Lindsey coming in as the OC from UCF, Phil Longo off to Wisconsin, and South Carolina's no stranger to having a new offensive coordinator with Dow Loggins coming in this year, replacing Mark Satterfield. What, if anything, is going to look different for this Tar Heels offense this year?
Yeah, I mean, really, they're still going to go to that sort of air raid style offense. Chip Lindsey, he's been consistent saying that he recognizes the strength of UNC's passing game, and he doesn't want to switch it up too much. It's more of a focus on just evolving and also improving the team's run game and just general red zone offense to supplement that. He previously led a super explosive UCF offense that excelled in both total offense, rushing, and really what he's focusing on, what he's talked about in fall camp, is simplifying those offensive principles, focusing on technique and minimizing the mental complexity for players. He's described his coaching philosophy as be fast and be physical, just aiming to keep players focused and clear-minded on the field. He's also talked a lot about working with Drake May, specific to his footwork, but really you're not going to see that much of a change in UNC's offensive style. But hopefully, UNC hopes that you'll see some more run game mixed in there. But again, with, Drake May throwing the ball, you're going to want to see, bullets flying. You're going to want to see an emphasis on the passing game, as always.
And one more question before I let you get out of here. The line for this game, I believe, opened up at with North Carolina being a 1-point favorite. It's kind of moved around between 1 and 1.5. I think we all expect this to be a very competitive matchup down to the end. Do you think North Carolina has the advantage here?
I mean, I'm tempted to say, again, with May throwing the ball, they do, but it's really, for me, going to come down to who has the ball at the end. I think it's going to be an offensive shootout. They'll come down to late game situations, and really, especially with, South Carolina's Spencer Rattler, like you said, he's showcased his wins, his talent rather, and wins over Tennessee and Clemson last season. And the defense needs to be prepared to step up and limit those big, explosive offensive plays. If they can just, hold the line on that, let Drake May cook, I think UNC will have a slim advantage, but it should be a close one. I'm excited for it.
Well, Shelby, once again, thank you so much for taking some time this morning to give us a little bit more insight into the North Carolina program, and we're all excited to see what happens in 18 days.
Yep, thank you so much.
All right, again, though, Shelby Swanson, who's the sports editor at the Daily Tar Heel up there in Chapel Hill. Coming up next, going to dive into a little bit of what could look different with college football playoff in 2024 now that we know the Pac-12 is no longer in existence pretty much. That's up next. You're listening to The Extra Point. I'm Tyler Head on 107.5 The Game.
The Extra Point with Tyler Head and Gamecock Central on your home of the Gamecocks. 107.5 The Game.
And welcome back into The Extra Point here on 107.5 The Game. Tyler Head along with you. Thank you once again to Shelby Swanson from the Daily Tar Heel, giving us a little bit more insight into what's going on with this North Carolina program as we get closer and closer to that Week 1 matchup coming up in Charlotte. I want to remind you this Friday, we're going to be broadcasting live from 9 until noon once again out at Steel Hands Brewing in Casey's. We get you set for the Gamecock Central preseason kickoff party, which is coming up this Saturday out at Steel Hands. Everything begins at 1 o'clock as the VIP tent opens. After 4 o'clock, it is a free event to attend. Going to be music, food, of course, great drinks out there at Steel Hands Brewing. But if you want to be part of the VIP section, which is open from starting at 1 o'clock, head on over to GamecockCentral.com and see about purchasing tickets. Inside the tent, you're going to have Q&A with Gamecock alumni, players, and coaches as well. Going to get to meet a lot of us from here at 107.5 The Game and Gamecock Central as well. So certainly don't want to miss the opportunity there for the Gamecock Central preseason kickoff party again coming up Saturday out at Steel Hands Brewing in KC. I mentioned this before the break. This is a story that came out this morning from Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports. Coming up at the end of the month, August 30th in Dallas, leaders of the college football playoff are scheduled to finalize the format of the 12-team playoff in 2024. Now, a month or so ago, this meeting wouldn't have been that big of a deal. We knew what to expect with the 12-team playoff as it had been previously announced, but now things are going to have to be revisited a little bit. Of course, the 12-team playoff format initially was the 6-6 model, which meant the 5 Power 5 conferences as well as one group of 5 conference got in with their conference champion. So the SEC champion, ACC champion, Pac-12, Big 12, Big 10, all locked in the 12-team tournament. And then the highest group of 5 champion, whether that be from the AAC, Conference USA, whatever it may be, whatever the highest ranked one was, would also get in. And then you fill out the other 6 spots with at-large bids. Well, now that the Pac-12, 4, whatever we want to call it, is seemingly on its deathbed, and the conference itself, what we know is the Pac-12 cannot exist in its current form with only 4 schools: Oregon State, Washington State, Stanford, and Cal. You cannot have a legitimate conference with so few schools. The anticipated thing is that it would end up merging with the Mountain West and creating, I'm assuming they keep Pac-12 name just for history's sake, but that's not going to be viewed as a Power 5 conference. You know, let's be honest. New Mexico State or New Mexico, Hawaii, like those aren't Power 5 teams. They're not going to suddenly become ones just because they merge with the dying carcass of the Pac-12. So the decision makers have a couple of options to consider. Now, again, this is per Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports. They have 2 formats as likely replacements for the 6-6. So you have the 5-7 format, which this is the number of team remains at 12, but automatic qualifiers drop from 6 to 5, and the at-large spots increase from 6 to 7. The 5 highest-ranked conference champions get automatic qualifiers, and the next highest-ranked 7 teams receive at-large spots. This still guarantees one group of 5 champion earns a bid in the playoff, with 9 conferences would guarantee 2 at least getting a bid. So that essentially eliminates the Pac-12, considering a Group 5 conference at that point in time. You're then guaranteeing your ACC champion, SEC champion, Big 10 and Big 12 champion get in. And then, again, whatever conference ends up having the highest-ranked champion out of the Group 5 gets one of them in. And it could come from this Mountain West Pac 10, 12, 14, 28, whatever it may be. So there's still a possibility that you can get in as long as you are the highest-ranked champion, and then you fill out the other 7 spots with the remaining teams as far as rankings go. The other option, the 12 best teams. What a concept. If you have a 12-team playoff, you could just take teams 1 through 12. That's insane to think about, I know. Would that be the smartest option? Absolutely, because what have we done with the 4-team college football playoff? We've taken the 4 best teams per the committee's ranking and allowed them to play in the college football playoff. Why do we suddenly have to make things different, expanding from 4 to 8 teams? And look, in a given year, the SEC champion, the ACC champion, the Big Ten champion, most likely going to find itself within that top 12. So not a whole lot to worry about. Now, the Big 12 champion's been a little bit of a different story. I believe Kansas State was just on the outside looking in last season as far as rankings go. But still, if you're going to be in the 12-team college football playoff, shouldn't you be one of the best 12 teams in the country? I would think so. That being said, I feel like the 5 and 7 model is the most likely option here because that does protect the interest of the conferences themselves as well as the group of 5 teams, because the group of 5 in a best 12 scenario does not get a guaranteed spot into the college football playoff, and with the 5 and 7 model, they do. So they're obviously going to want to sign off on that. Again, the SEC and the Big Ten probably going to be the only ones gunning for a best 12 model, because that could potentially open up the possibility of getting in 5-6 teams from your own conference where you don't have to worry about automatic qualifiers. The ACC and the Big 12 probably not going to want to sign off on that one. So I would imagine the 5 and 7 model is most likely going to come to fruition. And again, it's not a huge deviation from what they were already going to do with the 6 and 6 model. So not a whole lot has to change there necessarily. But personally, and I've said this over and over again, I'm in favor of the best 12 model because that makes the most sense to me. If you want to have a 12-team playoff, why not feature the best 12 teams in college football? But that's probably not going to I'm probably not going to see my wish come true on that one, but I can still cross my fingers and hold out hope that maybe they'll come to that decision here in 2 weeks. That'll do it for today's edition of The Extra Point. Again, thank you once again to Shelby Swanson from the Daily Tar Heel joining me for a little bit talking about North Carolina football. Coming up next, it is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs on 107.5 The Game.